Imagine an ordinary person. She wakes up, grabs her phone, checks messages, and already feels a slight discomfort, perhaps anxiety, perhaps a faint sense of failure. She doesn't even realize it, but she's already under attack. A thought arises. You're late again. You never managed to stick to a routine. Another thought appears. Look how well others are doing, and you, still stagnant. These thoughts didn't ask for permission to enter. They arise automatically, like reflexes. And the most dangerous part? She believes them, without questioning, without investigating, without even realizing that she is under the influence of something that is not her. What this person doesn't know, and what most people never discover, is that these thoughts are not just harmless comments. They are commands. They shape emotions. They define behaviors. They ruin decisions. They sabotage dreams. And the most insidious part, they do all of this disguised as truths. This is the trap of the modern mind, an invisible prison where the shackles are not made of iron but of internal language. Psychiatrist Beck, founder of cognitive therapy, made a discovery that completely changes the way we should view the mind. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer, the awareness that witnesses these passing mental events. It seems simple, but this distinction is the fine line between psychological freedom and emotional imprisonment. Because when you believe that I am a failure, you are not just having a thought, you are merging with it. You are identifying with it as if it were your essence. And that's where the thought wins. Beck called this phenomenon cognitive fusion, and his thesis is as profound as it is frightening. Most of our emotional suffering does not come from the external world, not even from our deepest traumas, but from the way we think about them, and more, from how we automatically accept these thoughts as if they were absolute truths. Thoughts like, I am inadequate, no one likes me, everything will go wrong, are not simple ideas. They are distorted filters that interpret reality for you, shaping everything you see, feel, and do. You may think you are in control. But if you cannot observe a thought without identifying with it, who is really in charge of your life? The human mind, when not understood, acts like a parasite. It inhabits your body, consumes your energy, and dictates your actions, all while you believe you are acting of your own free will. This video is for those who have ever felt dominated by their own mind, for those who live in internal conflict and don't know why, for those who are tired of negative thoughts that arise out of nowhere and hijack their entire day. And most importantly, it is for those who are ready to hear a truth that may hurt, but can also set them free. If you do not learn to observe your thoughts, they will control you. The good news? There is a way out, and it begins with what Beck called cognitive restructuring, the ability to create distance between who you are and what you think. In this video, we will explore how automatic thoughts shape your life without you realizing it, how cognitive fusion traps your identity, and more importantly, how to start regaining control. Because your mind can be your greatest enemy or your most powerful tool. The choice, for the first time, may be yours. Your mind lies to you. And perhaps the biggest lie it tells us is this: if I think something, then it must be true. This is the root of illusion, the confusion between thought and identity. When you think, I am weak, I am stupid, I am not enough, your mind is not just creating a narrative, it is building a prison. And you, without realizing it, willingly enter it. Beck observed something devastating in his patients. They were not just suffering because of external events. They were suffering because they completely believed in every negative thought that arose in their heads. They did not say, I am having the thought that I am a failure. They said, I am a failure. This linguistic difference reveals something much deeper. They were the thoughts. They had collapsed their identity with what the mind automatically produces. This is cognitive fusion. But stop and think for a moment. If you can observe a thought, then you are not the thought. The observer is never what is observed. When a thought like, "I am not good enough" appears, it is just that, a mental event. A transient phrase, an electric spark. And yet, how many lives are ruined because of this small illusion? How many dreams are abandoned? How many relationships are sabotaged? How many decisions are indefinitely postponed because of a thought that arose and was believed? The trap lies in the naturalness with which these thoughts arise. They appear as if they are neutral descriptions of reality, when in fact they are distorted interpretations, often inherited from past experiences, unresolved traumas, or simply learned conditioning in childhood. And the worst part, the more they repeat, the more true they seem. The human mind has a dangerous cognitive bias. What is repeated often is accepted as truth, even if it is pure distortion. Beck called these patterns negative automatic thoughts. They do not ask for permission, they do not announce their arrival. They arise the moment you face a challenge, a rejection, a mistake, or even a simple discomfort, and their impact is immediate. They activate intense emotions, trigger physical reactions, change your behavior. But all of this only happens because you believe in them. Belief is the fuel of the mental prison. Thought only has power when you accept it as identity. It is at that moment that it ceases to be an idea and becomes a command. And the mind, like an obedient system, begins to organize everything around to prove that thought was right all along. If you think, "No one likes me," you start to behave defensively, distantly, perhaps even hostile. People pull away, and the mind says, "See, I told you." This is the vicious cycle of cognitive fusion. A thought generates emotion, which generates behavior, which reinforces the thought. And the wheel turns. It turns until you forget that you are inside it. It turns until you completely confuse yourself with what you think. And that is when the thought wins. But there is a way out, a way to break this cycle, a skill that can be trained and developed. The ability to recognize that thought is not reality, that thinking something does not make it real, and that you have the right and the power to question every idea that arises in your mind. In the next part, we will explore where these automatic thoughts come from, how they form, and why they seem so convincing. We will understand in depth what happens inside your mind when it takes control, and what you can do to interrupt this process before it becomes destructive. Ready to face your own mental pattern? Then let's get to the heart of the problem: negative automatic thoughts. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Within the human mind, there exists a mechanism that operates in the background, constantly, silently, like an invisible algorithm. It is what Aaron Beck identified as negative automatic thoughts, or NATs in English, negative automatic thoughts. These mental constructs are not elaborated, thought out, or reflected upon. They arise with the speed of a snap, the exact moment a stimulus appears. And the most frightening part? They seem absolutely real. You arrive late to work and think, "I'm irresponsible." You receive criticism and your mind races. "I never do anything right." You see someone you care about distancing themselves and immediately conclude, "People always abandon me." None of these thoughts were chosen. They emerged. And no matter how irrational they may seem under cold analysis, in the heat of emotion, they sound like absolute truths. That is the trap. Beck realized that these thoughts do not come from nowhere. They are shaped by cognitive schemas, internal structures built over a lifetime, often since childhood. They are like lenses through which you interpret the world. And if those lenses are distorted by past rejections, unprocessed traumas, or constant criticism, what you see will be equally distorted. The NATs are not just fleeting thoughts. They are emotional triggers. When you think, "I am useless," you immediately feel sadness, shame, or anger. The body reacts. The heart races, the stomach tightens, the muscles tense. This emotion shapes your behavior. You withdraw, sabotage yourself, remain silent, hide. And the worst part, this behavior reinforces the initial thought. You act like someone useless, and the mind says, "See? I was right." Beck classified the gnats according to patterns of cognitive distortion that repeat across different people and contexts. One of the most common is catastrophizing, a tendency to imagine the worst possible scenario. A mistake becomes a tragedy. A problem becomes a collapse. Another pattern is mind reading. You believe you know what others think of you, usually something negative. "She thinks I'm pathetic. They are laughing at me." There is also overgeneralization. A single failure becomes proof that you always fail. "This never works out. I ruin everything." These distortions create a parallel reality, a reality where everything seems hostile, dangerous, and without escape. And the cruelest part? You believe you are seeing the world clearly. You do not realize you are inside a maze built by your own thoughts, a maze with no exit, where every path leads back to pain. But why does the mind do this? The answer lies in its primitive function: survival. The human brain evolved to detect threats, predict dangers, and avoid rejection. It prefers to err on the side of caution rather than lack of it. The problem is that in modern life, this protective function has turned into sabotage. What once protected us from predators now prevents us from living fully. The mind does not distinguish past from present, nor reality from imagination. A negative thought is enough to trigger the entire alarm system, even if it is false. And if you are fused with that thought, it not only affects you, it commands you. It dictates your emotions, manipulates your decisions, defines who you believe you are. You become a puppet of your own distorted cognition. But there is a breaking point, a moment when you can look at a thought and say, "Wait, is this true, or is it just a repeated pattern that I never questioned?" That is the beginning of liberation, and that is exactly what Beck proposed with his most powerful technique, cognitive restructuring. In the next part, we will dive into this transformative process. We will explore how to create space between you and your thoughts, how to challenge, reframe, and replace the ideas that have been sabotaging your life. Because if you cannot stop thoughts from arising, you can learn not to believe them, and that simple choice can change everything. The mind can be a tyrant, but it can also be trained. Aaron Beck not only identified the trap, he showed the way to escape it. The tool he developed is simple in concept, but profound in effect. Cognitive restructuring, a technical name for an essential skill that no one taught us in school: questioning our own thoughts. Most people live in a state of cognitive hypnosis. They do not realize that they are constantly reacting to interpretations, not to facts. When someone does not respond to a message, the mind says, "She is ignoring me." When something goes wrong at work, the internal voice fires off, "You always mess everything up." These reactions happen in milliseconds and are accepted without resistance. The mind decrees, and you obey. Cognitive restructuring breaks this cycle. It is the moment when you, for the first time, stop, observe, and say, "Is that really so?" Instead of being a blind passenger of the mental flow, you take the wheel and start driving with awareness. The first step is to become aware of the thought, and this requires practice. At first, you only notice the damage after you have already reacted, after you have already sabotaged yourself, exploded, or isolated yourself. But with practice, you begin to recognize the patterns. You start to name the thoughts. "I am having the thought that I am incompetent." It seems like a small change, but it is immense. Because by saying, I am having the thought that, you place yourself in the position of an observer. You create space between the self and the mental content. That space is everything. It is the difference between being dominated and having choice, between reacting and responding, between sinking and breathing. The second step is to interrogate the thought. Beck proposed simple yet extremely powerful questions. Is this a fact or an interpretation? What evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? Is there another way to see this situation? These questions force the mind to shift from automatic mode to analytical mode. You cease to be a victim of the mental narrative and become its editor. For example, when thinking, I am a failure, you might ask, is this a fact? What have I achieved in the past few years? Am I ignoring my victories? Suddenly, the thought begins to lose strength. It ceases to be a dogma and becomes just a thought. And thoughts can be changed. The third step is to replace the dysfunctional thought with a more realistic and functional alternative. This does not mean repeating false affirmations or empty phrases. It means building a new narrative based on evidence and balance. For example, instead of I am a failure, you might rephrase, I have made mistakes, but I have also had achievements. I am learning and evolving. This new way of thinking is not toxic optimism. It is clarity. It is recognizing reality without the lenses of distortion. This process does not erase negative thoughts. They will continue to arise. But now, instead of automatically believing them, you see them for what they really are: passing mental events, noise of the mind. And when you do not react to the thought, when you observe it, question it, and let it go, you break the spell. You regain control. Beck said that the goal is not to eliminate negative thoughts, but to change the relationship we have with them. This is psychological freedom. It is when you look inside your mind and say, I see you, but you do not define me. This simple statement changes the internal dynamic. You cease to be a puppet of your cognition and become the author of your consciousness. But there is something even deeper. Something that happens when this practice becomes constant. When you train your mind to observe without reacting, to question without collapsing, to respond with awareness. At this stage, something extraordinary happens. You begin to change your own emotional structure. The thoughts not only lose strength, the emotions they triggered also dissolve over time. In the next part, we will explore exactly this. How the practice of cognitive restructuring transforms your emotional life. How it prevents you from being hijacked by anxiety, dominated by anger, or paralyzed by guilt. Because thoughts shape emotions. But when you change the thoughts, you change everything. Most people believe that their emotions are directly caused by the events they experience. They lose a job, end a relationship, receive criticism, and immediately feel sadness, anger, shame, anxiety. But Aaron Beck revealed a deeper and more disturbing truth. It is not the facts that determine what we feel, but the way we think about them. Emotion does not arise from reality. It arises from the interpretation we make of it. And these interpretations, as we have seen, are often distorted. If you interpret the end of a relationship as, no one will ever love me again, it is not the end itself that hurts. It is the story your mind told about it. If you interpret a failure at work as, I am a complete failure, it is not the mistake that destroys your self-esteem. It is the conclusion drawn from it. Emotional suffering is largely constructed. And if it is constructed, it can be dismantled. This is where the true power of cognitive restructuring comes in. It allows you to separate thought from emotion. When you observe a thought, instead of collapsing with it, you create an internal space where emotion does not automatically settle. You gain time to reflect, to breathe, to choose. This time is what differentiates an impulse from a response. It allows you to feel anxious without being consumed by anxiety, to notice anger without exploding in aggression, to recognize guilt without sinking into self-deprecation. This space between stimulus and response is the territory of emotional freedom, and it is only accessible when you stop treating thoughts as absolute truths. When you understand that a thought does not need to be fought or eliminated, just observed. This conscious observation dissolves much of the emotional force behind dysfunctional cognition, because thought loses its authority when seen for what it really is, a hypothesis, not a decree. This skill, when cultivated, transforms the way you live. Situations that once triggered emotional crises begin to lose their impact. Comments that once hurt now sound neutral. Challenges that seemed unbearable become manageable. Why? Because your mind continues to produce thoughts, but you no longer believe in all of them. You have developed what Beck called cognitive distancing. The ability to recognize that I am having a thought that this is terrible is not the same as this is really terrible. Imagine the strength of someone who, faced with a thought like, I am inadequate, can simply say, okay, this thought has appeared. But it is not a reflection of reality, just of my mental story. This is a form of power that does not shout, it does not fight, but it silently redefines the internal experience. It is the kind of strength that does not depend on inflated self-esteem or forced positivity. It is lucidity, it is emotional maturity, it is freedom. But this process requires practice, and more than that, it requires vigilance. The mind is skillful. It knows how to disguise itself. And even after understanding all this intellectually, you may, in a moment of vulnerability, fall back into identification. Therefore, the next step is to develop a continuous posture of conscious presence. A kind of mental state where you live with mindfulness, with the ability to perceive thoughts as clouds passing in the sky, without clinging to any. In the next part, we will dive into this more subtle dimension, how to cultivate the role of observer of the mind, and why this is the true turning point between an emotionally reactive life and a life governed by awareness, clarity, and inner power. Because recognizing that you are not your thoughts is the first step. Living as that observer is what transforms your reality. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. The human mind is an extraordinary machine, but dangerous when it operates without supervision. It thinks all the time, analyzes, judges, compares, interprets. And amidst this incessant flow, a rare but transformative phenomenon can occur. You realize that you are thinking. This moment of metacognition, of awareness of one's own mental activity, is the key to a new kind of freedom. This is where the observer is born. Aaron Beck was a pioneer in making this awareness practical and accessible. He was not talking about spiritual enlightenment or a distant mystical state. He was talking about something concrete, the ability to look at a thought and say, I see you, but you do not define me. This simple phrase represents a break from centuries of automatic identification with mental content. The observer is that instance within you that watches, that notices, that recognizes without reacting. It is not reactive. It is not trapped in fear, urgency, or the need to be right. It simply sees, and in that seeing, it dissolves. Because an observed thought loses its commanding power. It ceases to be an imperative and becomes a transient event, like the sound of a car passing on the street. Present, but irrelevant. But cultivating this observer is not easy. It requires training, patience, and above all, mental discipline. The mind will resist. It will scream. It will try to pull you back into identification. It will use old stories, painful memories, familiar phrases. It will try to convince you that this is different, this you need to take seriously. But it is not. It is just another thought. The practice of observing without merging is a daily exercise, and it starts in the simplest moments. When a thought arises, "I won't succeed. She rejected me because I am useless. This will go wrong." Stop. Breathe. Name what is happening. "I am having a negative automatic thought." Just that. Naming is already an act of disidentification. It is like turning on a light in a dark room. What once seemed an absolute truth now reveals itself as just a mental construct. Over time, you begin to anticipate thoughts. They arise, and you already see them coming like old acquaintances. You greet them, but do not invite them in. They pass, and you remain. This is the power of the observer. It is the fixed point amidst the mental storm. It is the space between stimulus and reaction. It is where your freedom resides. But this state of presence is not just a cognitive technique. It is a lifestyle. Living as an observer means stopping the fight against thoughts and starting to understand them as part of the mind's functioning, not of your identity. You do not choose what the mind thinks, but you can choose how you respond. And this choice, made consciously and repeated consistently, begins to shape a new pattern, a pattern of lucidity. From this new internal place, you begin to perceive something even deeper. Many of the most destructive thoughts in your mind are not even yours. They were planted by voices from the past, parents, teachers, traumatic experiences, social patterns. They are inherited phrases, unconscious programming. And you repeated them so many times that you came to believe they were part of who you are. In the next and final step of our journey, we will look at this programming with clarity. We will understand how to stop being a puppet of inherited thoughts and start living with psychological autonomy. Because now that you have learned to observe, it is time to go further. It is time to regain the power to choose who you are, above what your mind says you should be. Now that you understand the game, everything changes. Because what once seemed like an uncontrollable chaos inside your mind, an avalanche of negative thoughts, automatic judgments, self-destructive narratives, now reveals itself as a system. A system that can be understood, deactivated, reconfigured. The moment you place yourself in the position of an observer, you take back the control that has always been yours but was dormant. The truth is brutal but liberating. For much of your life, you have been programmed. Not out of bad intention, but through conditioning. Family members, teachers, authority figures, and traumatic experiences have left marks. Phrases like, "You are lazy," "You will never succeed," "No one will love you this way," are not just memories. They are internalized thoughts that repeat as if they were your own ideas. But they are not. They are echoes. Echoes of the past that continue to operate in the present, unchallenged. These voices have shaped your self-esteem, your choices, your limits. They have created an identity based on fear, inadequacy, guilt, and insufficiency. And you believed, for years, decades perhaps. And that is why breaking this cycle is not just a matter of understanding the process cognitively. It is a matter of courage. Because facing these thoughts with clarity means recognizing that you have been controlled by them, that you have acted against yourself, believing you were just being realistic. But there is an even more powerful piece of news. You are not your mind, and you never were. The mind is a tool. Complex, powerful, wonderful, but a tool. And when you believe you are what it thinks, you become a slave to the instrument. You live defensively, always reacting, always afraid, always trying to prove that you are enough. But when you sit on the throne of consciousness and start to use the mind instead of being used by it, everything changes. True freedom is not the absence of negative thoughts. It is the ability to see them without getting lost in them. It is looking at the mind and saying, I recognize this story, but I don't need to live it again. It is the power to choose new responses, new interpretations, new paths. This is psychological autonomy. This is inner sovereignty. And yes, it will hurt. It will hurt to realize that much of what you suffered was unnecessary. It will hurt to face the responsibility of change. It will hurt to abandon the identity built on pain, inadequacy, and failure. But this pain is part of the liberation process. Because when you stop running from it and start to look honestly at who you are, beneath the thoughts, you find something that no mental narrative can destroy. Your essence. You are not the thought that you are weak. You are not the thought that you are not enough. You are not the thought that you have failed. You are the one who observes all of this and still remains. You are the space where all these thoughts come and go, but that never disappears. And it is in this space that true power resides. The power to stop, breathe, and consciously choose who you want to be, what you want to believe, and how you want to live. If this has touched you in any way, leave in the comments. Which automatic thought dominates you the most today? What is that phrase that your mind repeats and that you are now willing to question? Sharing this could be the first step to breaking the cycle. And remember, this journey does not end here. The next video is an essential continuation of this transformation. It will show you what is still operating in the deeper layers of your psyche. Don't ignore it. Watch it. Because you deserve more than to live controlled by your own mind. You deserve to live in full awareness. See you there.